Well, there's gonna be a little bit of a break.
That's fine.
So I'll probably do a part 1 and part 2 of the video, but
that's cool. I didn't even realize you guys were doing something. I would have liked.
that's fine, dude. Join in the talks. It's a very spur of the moment kind of like we're just doing talks and stuff. Like this is like
the thing is, like, I do know a decent amount about like old comics and shit. So
yeah.
But Jack Hawksmoor has stuff like, okay, something's going on in the city. Let me meditate and talk to the city and see what I can figure.
And he talks to like the collective consciousness of the city, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
He can't leave cities. If he does, he dies.
Okay.
But he has the ability to form like a cocoon type thing and teleport to other cities. It takes a while. But he can do it. And one of the he was part of main DC continuity because Wildstorm wasn't. Wild was his own thing. He was part of main DC continuity, and it has one of my favorite scenes in comics, which is him. So something happens in the Midwest, and everybody's a little confused about it. So they go to Jack Hawksmoor because they're like, hey, something happened. And he's like, yeah, it's a little weird. I sense that there's a city there, but there's not. So he taps into like this network of cities, and he decides to talk to a few of them. And he goes into this weird A3 sort of place, and they're personified. So you have Paris, who appears as this blonde woman with long, curly blonde hair, wearing a very high-fashion dress. Then you have... who do you have? You have... okay, I guess someone else. You have Metropolis, who is a very thoroughly modern woman. She's wearing heels. She's wearing a pencil skirt, a suit jacket. She's very, very professional looking. And then you have Gotham, which is a gargoyle sitting on a throne of skulls.
But what about my favorite DC hero? He only appeared in one issue. His name was Codpiece Man.
Codpiece Man.
And he fired a giant laser beam out of his crotch.
That sounds like something that would happen. At sometimes I can't tell if DC is aware, and I just hope.
Hey guys, is DC woke? No clue. Is DC even self-aware of what they're doing? No clue.
Hanzo's coming behind you.
Ha ha!
So, who
Shot
else?
in the face.
Other characters that were just... Oh my god, the creation of Wonder Woman is terror.
Well, she's had like multiple different origin stories, and some of them are like really cool, and some of them are just really bad.
Well, let me talk about the real world creation.
Oh no.
Woman.
Are you talking about
actually-
like the author and like his
the weirdness of the author. He's such an interesting individual. Because take in mind that this dude was doing this stuff in the 50s.
Yeah.
So this dude was in a healthy, very functioning polyamorous relationship with two women,
which is cool,
and was very open about it.
Yeah.
In the 1950s.
Yeah, which is
cool. He also believed that inevitably women would take over, which was a little not standard.
Yeah.
And then the what was the other thing? He invented the lie detector.
Huh.
And sort of made Wonder Woman to be this icon of his ideas that eventually women will take over the world. And her early weakness, she didn't really have weaknesses in the beginning, except bondage.
Yeah, like bondage was like her only weakness, which was kind of like the weirdest, like...
Her actual weakness was bondage.
Yeah.
Like, and, oh yeah, he was also really, really into bondage and very, very open about it. In the 50s.
This character.
Yeah, they recently made a movie about him.
Yeah, no, I heard about that. That's actually the only reason I actually know really anything about, this guy.
Weird-ass man.
Well, I mean, for the time, yeah. I mean,
that's really what it is. It's for the time. He was a very bizarre individual.
Yeah, because he was like, you know, the 50s was like was the time when you weren't really open about that stuff. And even now is like one of those things where there's a lot of stuff there's less stigmas about like what that kind of person is all about and all that. But like, you know, some of us are more, you know, used to it. Yeah, than others. But you know, it's still kind of like odd to think about like how somebody, you know, got by like that in
Can we get out of the queue real quick?
Sure.
And you know, the craziest part about it is that this man did so much to play like such an important part in feminism in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
It's just so, the man who invented the lie detector, to me that's the weirdest part about it.
Yeah.
Is he invented the lie detector?
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think he ever expected that, because, you know, his relationship with his wives was really a big deal, because like it was pretty well accepted and they were both very successful in spite of him, which was kind of new again for the 50s, and he created Wonder Woman because of all of these views.
Yeah.
I will be back. I have to go do a thing.
Yeah.
I'll be back in like maybe like a few minutes.
Yeah.
The dude who made Wonder Woman. That's it's such an interesting like fact though. Like,
yeah, he was just this progressive anomaly, like trapped in the cultural wasteland of the 50s.
Well, are you telling me that the 50s was a cultural wasteland, that people actually are supposed to have rights, that communism is not a problem? Whoa.
I mean, at the time, it wasn't even like you could argue that, like, you know, at the time, like, communism itself wasn't the problem. It was the governments that used communism that were the problem, because the whole Cold War period was just fucked up.
The whole pre-Cold War period was just clowny.
It was. I don't know that clowny really does it justice, though. Like, it was just weird. Because it's just, you know, it's just like the things that people back then got into, and the notions they entertained, and the things they did, like the, you know, like when we were discussing the other day, what was that, the CIA thing. I don't know if you were there for that, when we were talking about how, like, you know, back those days, the CIA actually, you know, it came out that they actually were trying to use like LSD and stuff like that to experiment on people. And like,
to like talk to God and shit.
Yeah, and like the lengths that like the American government was going to try and outdo the Soviet Union, and like it's just. Like the reasons as to why the competition between the two governments are there, like they're historically documented. It's just the
fact that there's paperwork to back up how janky shit got.
Well, it's just the fact that, like, why, you know, like there's cause and effect there, but there's no real like realistic reason why. You know, like what you know. The Cold War was just sort of like this massive waste of time and energy. And it like affected American culture so much.
It took us
what is this?
Well, it was just like we were talking about how we went from like talking about what was the name of the guy who created Wonder Woman?
I have no idea what his name is.
I can't remember either, but like
something polygraph, probably, because it's called the polygraph test. Polygraph machine.
William Moulton Marston.
Yeah, nothing to do with polygraph. Polygraph means many graphs.
Okay, look, I'm fucking tired.
But anyways, we were talking about him, and we were talking about how like it's interesting that somebody is like, he was basically a progressive anomaly in a cultural wasteland is pretty much how I put it. And like because like you think about like one of the reasons why like culturally America was so stagnant back then was because like so many people like I feel like maybe like people who are probably way more historically versed and way more sociologically versed and everything in a more official capacity would probably disagree, but I think like a big part of the reason why people were so paranoid and shitty and xenophobic back then was because the Cold War kind of stoked those flames. Like, you talked about how like the Cold War like kind of like it the whole idea of the Cold War like just made society so much worse than back then than it needed to be.
A large part of it also has to do with how a lot of these progressive changes happened.
Yeah.
And how so you ever take you know how some people will keep classes
cue us back
in
up?
The if you want to.
Okay.
No, I actually yeah. So you know some people keep glasses in like the fridge.
Okay.
Beer.
Yeah.
And they take a glass out and they put something a little too hot in there and it just explodes.
Right, yeah.
I've had that happen.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time the major progressive beats in American history had to do with the fact that men were drafted and gone because they were drafted.
Yeah.
A lot of the major feminist movements in the United States made most of their progress in times where the population numbers were a little heavier because simply they had to work. So, like, the whole topic of, equal workplace rights meant a lot more when women literally had to be the ones doing the work.
Right.
Like, there was no option.
Right.
All right, that's World War I. Women get the right to vote because there's less men around. World War II, very similar, the idea of women working, and it's actually, you want to know one of the easiest places to look at how that affects America is trends in musical theater. I'm not even kidding about that.
No, I believe you though. That's like, art reflects life, and life reflects art, and all that. So it makes sense to me, honestly.
Musical theater has always been able to get away with a lot. Comparatively to most other mediums of art, because musical theater, despite being popular all over the country, it grew out of like one place,
right,
up until like 60s. You know what I mean? Up until the 60s and 70s, it all came out of New York, and that's when it started changing. Because you started getting things from England.
Right.
And you started getting things from California in the 60s and the 70s and 80s. And now they're just coming from everywhere, but still a very New York way of thinking. I have it written down somewhere, but basically the example that was used that I think really best exemplifies this is Anna Get Your Gun, where you had a lot of very pro-women musicals going on. You end up with Annie Get Your Gun, which is really the entire premise of that musical is a woman giving into her hopes and dreams so she can get the man. That is the entire premise of that show. When previous ones were a little more explorative about what women felt, had no issue, not with sexualizing women, but like really peering into the sexuality of women. A little bit of there's a difference. And that being said, a lot of that stuff really lined up with war and social progress in war. And then, a lot of the major stuff with feminist movements also happened in the 70s and 60s after Vietnam, when a lot of men were being shifted over. But the thing is, it was interesting with Vietnam as well, because a big part of the feminist movement with Vietnam was understanding that just sending men over is kind of a problem. But it wasn't in an equally bad sort of way. Do you know what the idea of negative equity? I don't know if that's the exact term, but that's pretty much the premise of it is, things are awful for one gender, we need to make it equally awful for the other.
No.
That's not the fix. It's less awful for the first one.
Are you sure?
The draft is the biggest, is the easiest example.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot of sexist institution behind the draft.
Yeah.
Inherently. And some people's response is, well, you know, we should make women sign up as well. And it's like, no, we should get rid of it. This really should what we should be doing. So,
Wait for
like...
me.
Oh, I thought you were the Orisa. Here you go.
Oh, I killed their tracer.
Oh, there you go. I saw that. The Tracer's name is Dick Beaver.
That's
Dick
beautiful.
Beaver.
It's a little gross, not gonna lie.
It's just a beaver, but instead of having a beaver tail, it has
That's
a
bad.
dick.
Okay, yeah, I died. We should have stuck together.
How could this happen to me?
That was really bad.
Alright, do I need to do this again? Okay, I can't.
I hate Symmetra.
So do I.
Well, at least
but
they
yeah.
can't use her anymore.
You know, that's where a lot of it lines up with the movements and everything. Because that's also in the 70s after it. And that's the thing, though. Because you had a lot of that. Back on what I was saying, the comparison of a shattered cold glass.
Yeah.
A lot of the reason why you were talking about the Cold War and kind of making it a little harder to accept than it should have been, a lot of that also had to do with that people leaving, and the change was happening because they were leaving.
Yeah.
And then it's like they were totally not adjusted for the change when, like at all.
Yeah.
So it's never been like an easy gradient, and I gotta say that's why things have been a bit different, because that would normally happen about every 20 years. Because you know, World War I, it's the 19 teens, World War II,
damn it!
40s, and then you have 1960s and 70s, and we haven't had anything like that really happen.
Yeah.
So now progress kind of needs to happen without these radical shifts, these like paradigm cracks.
Yeah.
I mean, the current political climate is kind of a paradigm crack if you look at it.
It is. It very much is.
And the last paradigm crack that happened was about 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Honestly,
with the recession and the... Well, actually, no, never mind. Shit, that 25 years ago was fucking 1992.
No, it was before that. It was in the 80s, wasn't it?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I
So
really
I was
gotta
saying
say,
25, and I was like, wait a second. Shit.
The biggest thing that really rattled the way Americans think, mind you, though, there wasn't the turning back like there was with the wars.
Yeah.
I guess I got to be 9/11. Like, I mean, that's really it. Like, honestly, in our lifetimes, the political and social landscape of the United States can be divided into a clearly before and after.
Yeah.
Now entering.
I mean, you can do that with a lot of things, but I think 9/11 specifically is a bit different.
Prepare for battle.
Yeah, well, because it was a radicalized it was radicalized in the information age. It wasn't it wasn't a paradigm shift.
Well, that's kind of like one of the
end all be alls for it.
Yeah, is like the fact that, you know, the information age has changed like our perceptions of things like those kinds of events, like, because it's not all facts. It's all, obviously, you know, there's like a lot of information being spread around, but not all of it is true.
Damn it. Well, there's also something to be said about the way information changes progress, and that's actually the paper I've been working on all day, and yesterday, and Friday. I'm working on right now is based on. I'm writing an examination of a movie called Titicut Follies. And Titicut Follies was recorded in 1967.
Right.
And it was actually a big agent of change but it was a social issue that got super talked about and only really had any sort of like change. I was about to play Road. Can I play Road?
I'm sorry. Yeah, you can play Roadhog. Where are you going to play? Actually, I'm going to play Zenyatta.
Major change to the Follies, and it's good that I talk about this because after this match, I have to get back working on it.
Okay.
It was a big hot topic, and it was weird. It also has to do with the big cultural idea of it. So, are you familiar with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest?
Yes.
Okay, so One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is a story that takes place in an asylum, blah, 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 blah. But the plot of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest has nothing to do with trying to expose the monstrosities of asylums in the United States. It's really more about the way society creates the sick. You know, and it's a pretty advanced, it's like an advanced study into label theory and its existence within the world of beat culture.
Yeah.
And this whole idea of, are the mentally ill actually ill, or are they simply the subsect of people that are considered unacceptable, whether through the greater part of the system, the Combine, as it's called in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or is it because of an actual state of illness? And I mean, from my own personal experience, like kind of looking at something like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I'm like, I'm glad they're also talking about, you know, oh, by the way, mental institutions are all, but at the same time, to kind of have the trials and tribulations that I've experienced be boiled down to nothing but a political avenue of storytelling kind of pisses me off a little bit. But Syndicate Follies is actually one of those pieces of fiction that doesn't do that. Well, it's not fiction, actually. It's a documentary. But it was a very differently filmed documentary. Basically, this individual, whose name I'm totally blanking on, because it's only a bit of... I know a lot about the individual, I don't remember his name. The whole premise of it is he goes to a psychiatric institution in Massachusetts and records the entire... Well, it spends about a year recording footage there. And it was a lot of controversy, because, my God, was the stuff pretty damn gruesome.
Yeah.
And, like, the way they treated people was inhumane. But this is one of the ways in which information kind of sparked progress by just simply creating awareness. In the sense that by creating this and even making this movie, the institution that was in question, Titicate Correctional Facility, they were prompted to change because of it, just because of its sheer existence. And the sheer existence of the information made them change.
Yeah.
And the movie was actually one of the first things in the United States ever censored just because the government didn't want people seeing it.
Yeah.
And it's this weird pocket of time in the 1960s where the rights of the mentally ill were really like a big deal.
Right.
It's very, 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 very brief window. It wasn't very long. Because it pretty much boiled down to, oh, Kennedy did some things. So I just left the group, by the way, because I'm now closing Overwatch. Like, Kennedy did something. But it's the way it works is that just a lot of the time, just information really does a lot to change zeitgeist of things. And I love actually having situations where I can use that.
Zeitgeist is a fun word. It definitely... you
know, and that was the last major change, but it was really weird because, you know, okay, so with Vietnam, you have a lot of people reacting to the idea of what it means to be American and what it doesn't mean to be American.
Right.
With 9/11, it's like this immediate defensive that happened, as opposed to this sort of, why are we over there? Do we have faith in our government? 9/11, the response was, well, we kind of have to.
Yeah.
Because this is bad.
Because it was an attack on American soil. It wasn't a.
It wasn't like a that's an over there problem. Why are we dealing with this? Because that was kind of the crux of Vietnam was like a lot of people just didn't want to be in Vietnam because they didn't feel that we had a reason to be over there because it wasn't our problem. But
It was
was
literally us doing a favor for the French that got out of hand
yeah,
after the French left.
yeah, and then 9/11 was very personal.
9/11 was 9/11 was a slap in the face basically
Yeah.
during the.
Yeah, so it was one of those situations where that if you said, "Hey guys, I really don't think that we have any business being over there," people would go, "No, you're un-American. That's wrong. You can't say stuff like that." And it's just sort of like, well, why not? Why can't it's I live here. This is affecting my life. Why can't I say anything about this? And it's like, well, you're against
Not
the
allowed.
country. Yeah, not allowed. You're against the country if you say something about it, against it. And it's like, no, I'm not against the country. I'm criticizing the direction that's being chosen because I genuinely think it's foolhardy. But back then you couldn't say something like that. Now you say it. People say it all the time because everything. There's been so much that's come out about Afghanistan and Iraq and all of that, and there's so many like questionable like aspects.
Decisions have been made.
Yeah, and
And there was also
Yeah.
a level of brutality towards the Americans in
Yeah.
Vietnam, and I think brutality is kind of the only word to use.
yeah,
Because, well, one, sending people over is a pretty brutal idea in and of itself.
yeah,
But the follow-up is you also had issues like Ohio State.
yeah.
Mind you, though, and I think it's, you know what, there's a certain point in which, like, if we're posting this anywhere, I'm going to start
Yeah.
keeping my mouth shut. But, because there's some other things I got to say that, like, that aren't
Yeah.
necessarily controversial, and by that I mean not controversial, but I mean I just don't want to possibly risk.
It's a subject
I
that's
mean?
like really tough to broach that
Yeah,
like just
and-
makes people uncomfortable. That's that. I love how like this whole thing has like it's progressed from being like this lighthearted conversation about like silly comic book character ideas to like
The way comic
Yeah.
books influence
Yeah.
progress in the
Yeah.
United States.
and then like
and then straight into Bush did 9/11.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be back in a few guys. I'm gonna go cook
Okay.
food.
Because the long and short of it is, there was a government sort of institutionalized brutality
Yeah.
in Vietnam, and I'm not going to deny that there is that same level of institutional brutality going on. Now it's just going on in a very different context,
Yeah.
which I'm not quite the person to be talking about.
Right.
Because, I understand and acknowledge that it's a problem.
Yeah.
But it's almost like the fact that it hasn't been a wartime thing. Well, it doesn't seem like it's. No, I said I'm not going to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of problems. It's very
Yeah.
sad. Anyway,
Yeah, that's reasonable though. I mean, probably. Were you gonna head off to write your paper or?
no, I'm going to be in here. I'm just going to be
Okay.
quieter.
Okay, that's fair. Because I figure I'll I don't really know how to find a stopping or realistically a starting point for this kind of
We're ending now. Stop recording, Ashton.
Because well I guess I'll just I'll stop.
Bye.
recording.